Hey everybody, it's January 27th, 2020. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's another Forex Early Warning Monday night webinar. We do 3 webinars actually every week. We do 2 on Wednesday and 1 on Mondays. The Monday one is the live chart reading, and Mark does 2 on Wednesday, one discussing one of the lessons and then talks about the market as well. We do all our lessons are archived, and the link to this slideshow is in the chat queue right now, so if you need to click on the links if you're new to this. We do an analysis of one individual currency group. We're going to do a multiple time frame analysis on that group, looking for resistance and support areas for entry points and targets. And then we're going to cover the analysis spreadsheet of that analysis, because before we start this webinar, I fill out the analysis spreadsheet based on the trends of the market using the 512 exponential moving averages, and we just fill in these little blocks here, and then it gives a reading. It breaks those pairs into individual currencies, showing us who is strong and who is weak. And we're going to show you that spreadsheet here in a minute. And we do this every week, so you guys could transfer this over to your own analysis and be able to do the same thing and be able to understand our trading plans or match up with it. That's what I did when I first learned. Did a bunch of studying, and then I would read the market, listen to Mark, and then see if I matched up with the plans. And then when I at least matched up plans, I knew I was on the right target at least. So we have a ton of resources available. There's some new links here in this slideshow. That's why I put the link in as well. So if you need that link again, let me know. I put it in there right at the beginning. And there's a bunch of 35 Forex lessons and where all the webinars are archived and everything like that as well. So let me go ahead and get the sheet open here. So like I said, I've used the look at trends on the far right of the chart, looking at is there fresh crosses or angle separation? Is the trend moving up or down? It's not, someone questioned the other day about overall trend. No, it's the very far right of the screen. What are those red and green lines doing? Are they separated and moving up in a direction, or they get, if they're crossing, that's not a trend, but are they pointing in a direction of a trend, or are they converged? If they're pointing at 3 o'clock, converging or barely across, that's no trend. It's got to be pointing up on an uptrend like 3 o'clock and pointing down at like 5 o'clock to be trending. So that's how I look at it. So I go to the weekly trend, the daily trend, 4-hour trend. You're looking for, is there a bigger trend in place, and are the smaller time frames in agreement with that, or is there a smaller intermediate trend that's building into a long-term trend? And I think that's what we're starting to see on the market actually. Right now you're seeing a lot of H4, D1 trends forming and a lot of D1 fresh crosses coming our way. So our job now is to see, is it going to continue to building in those directions? So what we got based on the sheets here, ideally you want to see a perfect alignment, but 5 out of 7 is okay. You still want to read between the lines, see if there's at least close to being lined up. And if you go to the dollar group, it's 5 out of the 7, and it's showing you an example of the dollar being strong, pushing the pairs down for the most part, except against the pound. But we know the pound's been strong, so those two are still slightly duking it out. The pound's not completely strong right now, but the dollar strength is trying to beat it right now. And the Swiss is strong as well. That's why the dollar Swiss isn't lined up. So if you have strong versus strong, there's no trend. So that just confirms, yes, the dollar is strong. So yes, it isn't lined up on that one, but a no trend should point you to that they're probably doing the same thing. So when pairs are doing the same thing, there's no movement, because strong versus strong equals no movement. Weak versus weak, there's no movement on those pairs. So we got short-term and medium-term strength coming in on the dollar group. So we're going to look at those pairs. And then the Swiss is strong as well, except against the yen. You're thinking, oh, it's red there. No, if you look at the example, the Swiss yen should be green. That's just showing me that the Swiss is strong except against the USD. Well, it's because the USD is strong as well. So that confirms Swissy strength. And, yen is stronger than the Swiss. And if you go down the yen, you can see the yen is really completely strong. So it still confirms that the Swiss is strong, but the yen just has to be stronger. So we have short-term Swiss strength and some short-term or medium-term strength as well. The pound Swiss, the pound's been strong. That's why there's no trend there as well. So it's showing you that the Swiss has some strength as well. The euro is pretty well mixed. The euro is weak against the euro, the dollar, the Swiss, and the yen, showing you that those pairs are just stronger than it. But on the weak pairs, the euro is stronger than it. So the euro is kind of just mixed. It's not really a driver of the market. You go to the yens, though, the yen is completely lined up. The yens are strong, short-term, medium-term, and you got a lot of fresh crosses coming on the W1. So this is a perfect, clear example of, short-term, medium-term strength building into it. Now, are we going to start seeing some of these weekly trends continue to form? If they are, then you really want to pay close attention to the yen. And we'll be looking at least one yen pair tonight to show you that, and then you'll be able to go on from there. The pound used to be strong completely across the board. Now it's getting mixed. It's trying to figure out what to do next. So there's no clear movement on the pound right now. The Aussie, though, has complete weakness, the biggest alignment out of all these pairs, because long term the Aussie has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 out of the 7 showing you Aussie weakness, except against the yen and the euro. So they're just switching trends on those two. But on the D1 it's completely lined up, and the short term it's lined up as well, except against the New Zealand, because the New Zealand's weak as well. So you got weak versus weak. So the Aussies are really one you want to go take a look at as well. And then you go to the CAD group. The CAD's not really lined up. It's really mixed on the CAD group. And then you get the New Zealand group. New Zealand group has short-term alignment except against the Aussie. Well, we know the Aussie's weak, and it's starting to build into the D1s. The W1s are not there, so this one's lagging behind the Aussie, or it could be building into it as well. Not clear. I mean, it's not perfect on this one on the D1s, but it's starting to come that way. So we'll take a look at that. That's the group we're going to talk about tonight. Is the New Zealand, and see how it's building into bigger trends. But on your own, make sure you look at the Aussie, and the yen group and the dollar group as well. But if you write this down on a piece of paper, you got USD strong, Swissy strong, yen strong. So dollar yen, you're not going to trade. Dollar Swiss, you're not going to trade. Those strong versus strong, you're not going to do. Aussie, New Zealand, you're not going to trade because it's weak versus weak. But you are going to look at the Aussie dollar, Aussie Swiss, Aussie yen, because that's strong versus weak. And then the same token with the New Zealand dollar, New Zealand Swiss, and New Zealand yen. So when you go through the New Zealand group tonight, take a look at how clean and easier those are to read compared to the other 4 New Zealand groups that we're going to look at. So with that, let me get the charts open here. So I have the New Zealand charts open. Let's go to the New Zealand dollar daily first. So this is strong versus weak. If you look at the monthly chart on this thing, there's no trend on this right now. Don't know which way it's going to go. The weekly though, it's converging, and that's a no trend. See, the 2 lines are starting to cross, converging, so that's considered no trend. It's not a downtrend. Even though it's starting to move down, it's not a downtrend yet, but you got a fresh cross coming soon, probably within a week or so. Then you get to the daily. The daily's been consolidating sort of in a pattern, and it broke out a couple of days ago, and it's continued to move lower. There is, based on the D1, there are support and resistance levels to be aware of, but it's trying to head down to the lows again. So if you go back to that W1 chart, the biggest area of support and resistance is going to be, what's this line here? Will be in this zone. It could come down to this area right here. So long term, if this one keeps moving down, you got a couple hundred pips. Doesn't seem like a lot on a weekly chart, all the way down to possibly 300 pips. Not a ton, but if you look at the bigger picture on the weekly, that's a significant area of support that it could be going back down into. So that, let me clear these lines out here. This is your major area of support that it came down off it, and it may want to consider to retest. Really strong D1 trend. Like we said, on this one, it's a fresh move, fresh D1 trend moving down, and you got 300 pips potential, barring any of these other smaller support resistance areas. But what I find is when they were oscillating in a zone before like this, that could be an area of support resistance that it's going to. But for the most part, I see this thing heading down and retesting those lows. So if you go to the H4 chart, you can see it's a really strong H4 chart. It moved down, and now it's like we're just needed to consolidate, then continue on. This thing could be starting a bigger trend to be looking for. Not huge potential, but it fits our criteria of over 100 pips, and it could be in this one for weeks as well. So another one that was based on the sheet saying it was a good one to look at based on strength and weakness. Doesn't mean one thing you got to remember is strength and weakness doesn't tell you the quality of the trend. It's just saying, hey, one's strong versus weak. It just point you to that, hey, that's one that's driving, but they could end up with bad support and resistance areas. So this thing overall has the monthly though is bouncing down. So you have a monthly downtrend. You have a fresh cross on the weekly to the downside with potential down to the lows. Let's just check that before we go any further. You're talking 150, 160 pips. Not huge potential. You're like, wow, a weekly chart, look at all that room to move. And it's only 100-something pips. Not super exciting, but it's telling you what direction it's going. And what did it do today? It broke below some recent support, which used to be old resistance, and now it's going to be heading down to those lows. But there are areas of support to watch out for. But as long as you have really good strong versus weak, you usually won't have that problem. Much of a problem is you got 60 pips all the way down to 150 pips. So not great potential, not one of the better ones to be looking at. But it is definitely going in that direction. So we'll get another one that was good on the list was the New Zealand yen. So the weekly on this one is converged. There's no trend right now, but it's looking like it wants to head to the downside. And if you go to the weekly chart, or the monthly chart is showing you there's no trend. Weekly's no trend, but it's looking like it wants to come down. And this one's setting up right on support. So this thing breaks this next support level, then the weekly is going to start converging and crossing. So let's check the potential on this one. I'll go back to the weekly like we did on the other ones and see how much room to move is on this one to the downside. And this one's a little better. We got almost 400 to 470 pips potential on this one to the downside. A lot nicer than the New Zealand yen. And you're going to see all the yens are really starting to strengthen as well. Daily is, like I said, going to the downside. So we got a really great support level to trade off of the 71.20 area with potential down to that 66.97 area. So it's a really nice setup. So it'd be nice if this thing consolidated on the H4 at this level, because we did get a gap down over on Sunday. It carried on, but we're sitting at that level. So it could sit here, and then the next move will be pretty nice on this one as well. So New Zealand CAD, so the CAD's mixed up, but the New Zealand is weak, so weakness should drive this thing down, but it's not going anywhere. So it's going against a individual currency that doesn't know what it wants to do. So right now the weekly doesn't know what it wants to do. The daily, this thing is just stuck in a zone. This is a prime example of not clear strong versus weak on this one. It did start moving down a little bit based on New Zealand weakness. If the CAD starts to strengthen at all, then you'll be watching this one. But until then, you're not going to. This one's not on the radar. But this is where the domino effect comes in. So yes, you see one that's this one's lagging behind, but all of a sudden New Zealand's staying weak, and all of a sudden the CAD strengthens. This one you're going to pay attention to because it's got the same setup. It's got a clear support level to trade off of and room to move. But as you can see how choppy this thing's been, these two have been duking it out. So stick with strong versus weak because they move in smooth their cycles. Like this last move on the New Zealand yen was because it was strong versus weak. You want those type of trades. You don't want these choppy, yucky trades. That's because that's clear, not clearly showing you it's not strong versus weak. So another one, the pound New Zealand. The pound New Zealand weekly is starting to cross to the upside. We could check the potential on that one up to the highs, and you're talking about 450 to 500, 600 pips potential to the upside. But if you look at the monthly chart, this thing has been trying to get above this area of resistance. So it's looking like it wants to go at least try again. And maybe this time it's going to break out, because if it does, it's got a ton of room to move. You got like 1,500 pips past that area. So if we go to the weekly chart, you can see that it's trying to cross to the upside. The D1 is nice enough to the upside, setting up real nice for a breakout to the upside. But what do we know? We know the pound isn't clear short term, at least anything what it wants to do. This is, the pound New Zealand weakness going on. But if all of a sudden the pound, you get a push alert that the pound's strong and New Zealand's weak, then this thing's going to at least go retest the highs and head up past this level. And you got, like I said, 400 pips just on this D1 chart alone, way better than that New Zealand Swiss setup. So just there alone, a shorter term trade that could lead into a bigger trade, it's got a lot of potential. And then get past that, you could be another 1,500 pips. So we'll see what the pound, it's really up to the pound, what the pound's going to do. If the pound starts building strength back into the market long term, then it's going to, break out. But at least short term, the New Zealand could drive this thing back up to retest those highs. If the pound's not doing anything, the New Zealand weakness, if it's that strong, will drive it up. And you can, nice clean setup on the 4-hour chart. We're sitting at resistance. It's consolidating. Just set a price alarm on that one. But on this one, you're going to make sure you got some pound agreement. I go look at the whole pound group on your own and see, hey, are they the short term starting to strengthen? If not, then it's going to be you want to go trade less lots on a higher risk trade like this. But if the pound all of a sudden is strong and New Zealand's weak, you want to jump in on this one when it starts moving. So we already talked about the Aussie and New Zealand are weak versus weak, and this thing's sitting on support, not going anywhere. So it's just consolidating. It's a really nice strong downtrend. This thing's just been oscillating. On the daily, you can see it hit these lows again. Let me back it up, even a bigger chart. This thing has just been chopping, even on the monthly chart. No clear setup, even though it's pointing to the downside. But short term, it's getting really choppy. Why? Because the two are doing the same thing. So I wouldn't be even considering that one on the radar at this present moment until I see a clear divide between those two. Lastly is the Aussie, Euro, New Zealand. So the Euro isn't showing you any clear signal on which way it wants to go, and it's kind of showing you in the charts as well. The weekly is going nowhere. Daily, it's giving you a fresh cross, heading up into, it's just been oscillating. I mean, this thing has been doing the same thing as the New Zealand. New Zealand's finally starting to pick a direction, but we'll see. It's got to break out of this zone of support resistance, preferably even above this little spike here. And this probably this area right here. So it's got a lot of junk in the way to start looking like a good potential, because you got 72 pips up to 150 pips to that first level. But past that, you got a lot more room to move. Potential going back up to highs of 600-700 pips. So if you go that bigger chart, that's the thing. Could just be wanting to oscillate right back up to those highs, which is a great trade setup. So let it clear this junk. Even wait for a fresh cross on the weekly chart, and then you got a lot of room to go on that one. Like I said, you got 700 pips plus, and then who knows, on the weekly chart, it could decide to break out of here, because you got to see what's happening here. Look at the big picture on this thing. These things are consolidating. They don't know which way to go. It's building a consolidation pattern, and when it breaks out of there, you know it's going to happen, and there's going to be a lot of pips to be had. So be patient. Could take weeks, could take a month, could take, who knows. Could take a year. We don't know. This thing's been sitting at these levels since 2012, just cycling up around, but it's been oscillating in big ranges. But now all of a sudden it's getting tighter and tighter. So if it's oscillations up to the next move, at least it's going to be hundreds of pips. And then if it breaks out of there, who knows? But we need to see a bigger change on the euro to take that. So, but right now you're looking at the ones that are showing you what's happening right now. These are just big picture. Watch what's happening. You know, you can set price alarms on these other ones. People, you know, want to trade these, you know, the ones that are the sitting behind, waiting to go, like they're better trades, but you're better off sticking with the ones that are the best of the best that are showing you, unless the heat map shows you otherwise, which would be considered a supplemental trade. You're looking to trade the New Zealand group, but all of a sudden the pound's strong, New Zealand's weak in the main session. You're taking the pound New Zealand, you know, but right now we're planning on New Zealand dollar, New Zealand Swiss, New Zealand yen to be the best movers. But that's relying on, once again, that same strength and weakness scenario to continue. You know, that's the definition of a trend, is a series of events favoring one direction. So if in order to trade the New Zealand dollar to the upside, you're going to need to continue to see New Zealand's, you know, the New Zealand being weak, dollar being strong, the dollar being strong, then New Zealand weak, or both happening at the same time. That just those scenarios back and forth. So you got to know what's going on with both sides of that pair at all times. That's your job as a trader, not to look at the pair, but to know what both sides are doing. Every time you're looking at a pair, you go, okay, that looks great, but what's the other side doing? This looks great for the New Zealand, but that other side, what's that country doing? What's the picture on it? If it's a mess, then you're asking for trouble. So the idea is to take the best of the best, not take everything just because you want to trade. You know, that's a bad approach to that. So, all right, that's all we got on the chart. So if you have any questions, throw them out to me, and we're willing to wait for questions too. If you got one that you just thought of and it's a long one, you're typing up, you're scrambling right now, get in the chat queue, type Q in the queue and wait for you. Otherwise, we don't wait very long for people, because our time is precious here, and we're here to help. If you got questions, we'll answer them as long as you need to. It's not looking like there are any questions, so you guys, we'll see you a week from today, and hopefully have some great reviews on these New Zealand pairs, or we'll be looking for some new trades next week. Thanks.